Hello and welcome to Alchemy 101, the show that explores all avenues of transformation and aims to offer some useful nuggets that can support us in living in line with nature in a way that's true to our nature, no matter how contrary that might seem, just like this nightingale, the bird that sings out in the dark. I'm JJ, the Practical Alchemist, and I'm so glad that you could join me today. How are you feeling right now? Good and loving this new year? Or are you stressed and finding life all a bit too much? Well, you're not alone if that's the case. So many people are struggling with all sorts of issues right now. But maybe my guest today will give you the inspiration to change your situation. Maybe you're in the right place right now to receive one of those nuggets that can start you on the road to something better. So who is today's guest? Well, she's Vanessa Louise Moore, an author, speaker and a coach whose naked philosophy is all about helping people heal the hurt within in order to live happier, more fulfilled, loving lives. After more than 25 years in the cosmetics industry, Vanessa came to see that looking fabulous on the outside really doesn't heal the pain on the inside. And just like many of us, she's felt her share of pain. She has successfully rebuilt her own life from a point where she felt suicidal and at rock bottom. Now, after healing herself, Vanessa's made it her life's work to support others in their healing through her naked philosophy. Now she's called the Naked Coach. Maybe that's why when we got together to talk about her work, I couldn't help myself from commenting on what she was wearing. Lovely to have you on the show. And for those of you who can't see you, you're looking very pretty in a gorgeous pink top there. I don't talk about my guests' clothing usually, but it's such a lovely colour of pink. And this is such a kind of an odd day here today where it's been snowing and now it's raining and now, so it's just lovely and brightening up my screen. So lovely to see you.
Thank you. And to you, JJ.
Thank you. And, I just wanted to ask you about where did this name, the Naked Coach, come from? Because obviously you're not sitting there naked.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
It's a very good question because obviously it can have a double meaning. The Naked Coach for me came from a dream I'd been having for decades. Ever since I can remember, I kept having a dream where I was caught in my local high street. It had to be my local high street, right? So it had everybody that I knew. And I would be caught in my local high street with no clothes on. And I couldn't cover myself up. I had nothing to cover myself up. And people were laughing at me and pointing their finger in my dream. And I felt embarrassed, humiliated, ashamed, and just like I just couldn't hide. And I thought at the time, I kept having this recurring dream because I had body confidence issues. I'd always had problems with my weight. Luckily, I was athletic, but I had to be very careful because I could easily gain weight. And I didn't have much confidence in the way I looked. So I thought that must be why I'm having this dream. And then after having my children and after turning my life around, I lost 6 stone and I kept having this dream. And I was feeling well in myself. I was feeling fit. Like I said, I'd lost this weight and I kept having this dream. And in a meditation, I thought to myself, why am I still having this dream if I'm feeling a lot more confident in my own body? And that's where it came to me that the being naked was actually the fear of showing up as my true self.
Oh, yeah.
I know, yes. And then I thought to myself, oh no, because I've done lots of work on myself and I'm still having this fear of showing up. And then what came to me is, who is that anyway? And that's when my journey began. So just really through experiencing what my dream meant to me, and in meditations, I started understanding myself, how I'd got to where I've got to, started sharing that in conversations with friends and business colleagues. And then that's where I then got dubbed the Naked Coach, as I recognized that there is a naked philosophy. When I was asked, how had I turned my life around? I didn't know. So therefore, I just spent lots of time in meditation going over how had I actually done it. And that's what became the Naked Philosophy. So there I was dubbed the Naked Coach. Yeah.
Fantastic. And now you help other people turn their lives around.
Yes.
So let's just then talk about how you did turn your life around, because you know, like many of us and many listeners, you've had an awful lot going on in your life, haven't you?
I have. I think from an early age, I was confused because, you know, that question at school, you know, what do you want to do when you leave school, Vanessa, et cetera, with the teachers. And I wasn't very clever at school. I wasn't very academic. School wasn't my thing. And I think we're finding that with our generation now, is that the type of education that's out there is not fitting for a lot of our budding entrepreneurs. And I found the same. So I really struggled. And I have two amazing parents that are well and thriving, and I have an adorable sister who is my best friend, my younger sister. So as a foursome, we led a very blessed life. My dad worked very hard, as well as my mum in our family. And my sister and I led what some would say a very blessed life. We had good relationships. We were very loving and encouraging of each other. Abby and I were fit and healthy, as well as my parents. And then I get asked that question, what do you want to do when you leave school? And it was like, I want to just help people feel better about themselves. Why was that important to me? Well, because I hated myself. I was like, how can I hate myself when I have such a blessed life? And there, from then on, I think I just found myself in situations where I attracted to myself all sorts of people and situations that really helped me go through life. And people say to me, what are the qualifications you have, Vanessa, to be able to help people? I say I went through the University of LIFE. I was dragged kicking and screaming at times through my life, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, for really to learn how to overcome life's adversities. So I found myself in all sorts of situations that I thought to myself, hold on, this isn't what I thought the real world was about, as I became a grown up and stepped out into my adulthood and my adult years. Like, I suppose like many people, actually, I'm finding in the conversations I have nowadays, a lot of us keep secrets, some of the stuff that's happened to us, because we think, I can't possibly tell people about that. And you start to feel really alone. And whether it is abuse, whether it's violence, whether it's addictions, whether it is, and a lot of the struggles we have are because of our own perception of ourselves, our own self-hatred.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, secrets, I always say secrets are really toxic, actually. And, you know, if we can verbalize them, if we can get them out into the world, if we can actually share them, then the healing power of that is quite extraordinary. But it's very, very difficult for some people to do that. So how have you got through that, and how are you helping others to do that?
It's interesting. I think I found myself in a place where I believed I had the life I'd always dreamed of ever since I was a small child, because I had a loving family. All I wanted was a loving family. And I was married with two small children, and I found my life gradually and then starting to accelerate out of control down into what seemed like a kind of black hole. And I couldn't understand. And again, I now have understand now with sharing my experience. Lots of us, many of us have this same experience, but we don't share it, in the fact that, how did I get here? This wasn't what I signed up for. When it all seems to be daunting and spinning out of control in that kind of flat spin. And I describe it as either lovely or unlovely, because I just like to keep things really simple, but it's not, that language is not dramatic enough sometimes for the depths of despair that we can feel. And I think I got utterly bewildered by the state that my life was in, that I just ignored. I buried my head in the sand. I put that lovely mask on that had become so familiar. If I just put a smile on my face, then nobody will ask. If I put a smile on my face, I can pretend that I'm not hurting. If I can put that smile on my face and grit my teeth, then one day I will be blessed with that kind of free feeling that I've always wanted. And I think how I overcame it was by actually getting to the point where deepest, darkest corner of my life kind of doesn't do it justice, but I pointed my finger at somebody in my life, screaming at the top of my lungs, I hate you. I hate
Wow.
my life. This is not how I didn't sign up for this. And in that place of pointing my finger, I saw three fingers pointing back at me. When I had got to that point of how has it got this bad? Why is my life just hideous? It's so painful to live through. How has it got this bad? And of course, we know that in asking questions, we're always given the answer, but are we open to actually hear the answer? Well, this night in 2008, I was definitely ready to hear the answer. And I had three fingers pointing back at me, and the person I was screaming at said to me, "Not as much as I hate myself." And I recognized in that moment, hurt people hurt people. And I still get tingles now as I speak about it, because we both have overcome such a lot to where we are now here in 2022. So 14 odd years later. But I remember standing there with shivers down my spine thinking, oh my gosh, of course, they're in so much pain that the only way they can overcome this is to project that onto me. It feels like, right? Whether it's deliberate or not, that actually I've got to take control of this situation. And that situation was, how do I take responsibility for myself? If I can take I was giving them the power by saying, I hate my life because of you. So how about I didn't know how I was going to do this, by the way, at this point, still very early in my evolving journey, but to actually stand there and think to myself, how do I take responsibility for myself? And that then opened up a whole realm of possibilities, because I was contemplating the unforgivable in how could I take my own life, but I got past that, and how could I take their life to stop the pain? And I know that I was never going to do that, but the fact that it scared me beyond belief that I could even contemplate killing somebody else to stop the pain. And then in that moment, about 3 o'clock in the morning, after I think sobbing for hours and hours, night after night, the miracle came to me. The answer came to me. And that's when I then promised myself that if something can resonate with me that much, I would do my best every single day to do what I could to make sure that I took responsibility for myself and my own healing. And as a result of that, my life began to change.
And can we say, just, be clear about the relationship that was involved here?
Yeah, that was my husband at the time. Yeah.
And so you went through a really rough patch.
We did, yeah. And both of us, individually and also together in the marriage, there was addiction involved, and it was, needless to say, very messy. So when drugs and alcohol are involved on his side, on my side was perfectionism and eating effectively. He needed me and I needed him to keep us in our own addictive cycles. But for the grace of God, that evening, something happened to both of us, and he did his thing and I did my thing. And he got well. He took the treatment that he needed to be well. I carried on my journey. 6 years later, we were doing really well, and we did split, and now we are the best of friends. Needless to say that the father of my children is one of my very best friends. But to get to this point has taken an awful lot of healing on both parts and all the relationships within our family.
Yeah.
And that's work on everybody. Everybody, if we can take responsibility for our own corner of the world, first of all, our own healing and our intimate relationships and our immediate relationships, can you imagine what the world would be like if we all just took responsibility for ourselves? Now, I can't do anything about anybody else's relationship with themselves and their own healing, but I can do something about my own. And I promised myself that if I could just do that for myself, then I would share what I can. And hopefully, like I have been with other people who shared their healing, be inspired by how they've done it and learn from other people's experiences, and having conversations like this with you and you sharing your experience and my sharing mine, that maybe somewhere someone is hearing, this is just what I needed to hear today, and are then able to then tap into that part within them where they can do it for themselves too.
Well, I think that's one of the main reasons for me doing this show is that, hopefully somebody somewhere will say, oh, that's what I needed to hear. That's really what I needed to hear. But how beautiful is it that you have been able to heal this relationship? Now, it's not on the same basis as it was when you were married, but it's a relationship now that you can enjoy, that is supportive and sustaining, and you can go forward, and people are able to live their lives in a much more productive and enjoyable and just beautiful way. And that it had that that sort of spreading effect amongst all your relationships, all your families and all your friends. It does. It's like an octopus. Say that again. It's like an octopus with tentacles. These tentacles reach out, don't they? And if they're tainted by this self-loathing and hatred and anger, then it taints all your relationships. I think that's so true.
Yeah, very much so.
So now you're in a good place, and you are the naked coach, and I can see why you're called that. You have had to lay bare everything that was going on in your life, and you continue to do so to help others.
Yeah.
If somebody comes to you and says, I'm really struggling, what's the first thing that you would say to them? Hold it right there for a few minutes, though, because it's time for us to take a break. I sound like a game show host, don't I? But we will be back with Vanessa's answer right after these messages from our sponsors.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And you're listening to Alchemy 101 here on UK Health Radio with me, JJ, the Practical Alchemist, and my guest, Vanessa, the Naked Coach. And here's how she answered my question: what was the first thing she would say to someone who came to see her for help?
That's a really good question. First thing I would say to them is, tell me what's on your mind. I call it what's on top. Tell me why you're here with me. Tell me what is it about your life right now? And then I just be quiet. A lot of the time, and especially in a very first conversation, whether they have asked me to help them, whether they've become a client, or whether it is just somebody I'm sat with, a colleague or a friend, and they've just got to the point where they just need to just let it all rip and kind of verbally dump, as I call it. What I do is I hold the space, because if they're vulnerable enough to say that they need help, if somebody is actually going to reach out and say, are you free for coffee, or could you listen to me? Then the privilege and the honor for me is to be able to say, here you go. And I'm kind of holding out my arms as if it's like a hula hoop. And I just invite them, just say, share, dump it all in here. And I promised myself I would always remain as neutral as I possibly could, because people can share some of the most revealing things. So by sharing with me what's on top, they begin practice talking about what's hurting for them. So it's what I call like the surface of the pond, the leaves on the top, they're bothered by the fact that the wind is ruffling up the surface of their pond, whether it be the fact that, the kids' rooms are an absolute state, or whether there was traffic on the way to work, or somebody's driven into the back of them, or, clients aren't returning their calls, and they're kind of, for God's sake, no, blah, blah, and they're just having a rant. And I go, just dump it all here. Because in doing that, first of all, we're just clearing off the rubbish that's on the top, because we think that that's the problem. Then by talking about that, we can then get to the next layer. And this can happen. Sometimes you can be there for a few hours, to be fair. Yeah. But if you're going to have ongoing support, then it just is bitter to time, because you cannot get to the crux of what the problem is. It's a bit like I call it like speeding down, slowing down a speeding train. If you've got this train that is careering out of control, which is a lot of what our lives feel like, which is why we reach out for help, and you put the brakes on instantly, it's going to upset the contents of the cart. So for me, by just tell me what's on top, and then it reveals the next bit. Now tell me about that, and then that reveals the next bit. Now talk to me about that. And then I just ask, not immediately, but give them a bit of space to dump it all. And then I just ask questions from what they've said, because there is always clues in their language. There's always things that resonate with me. And I hear intuitively, I can hear questions. I can hear what they're not saying. I can hear and I can sense, what's going on for them. And I just reflect that back. So there's no clever questions involved at all. I don't have to make anything up. I just respond. So it's a two-way communication, ultimately, so that they can feel loved, that they're not judged at all, that they feel safe to explore what's on top. And I just remind them that this is a process. So if you talk to me about what's on top and what's aggravating you, we will, by process of elimination, work our way down and down and down. And in that process, you feel safe, you feel secure, you feel you have the courage to be vulnerable. And as you can appreciate, as I'm sure you have, I have people sharing some of the most horrendous, horrific and beautiful things with me. And I get said to me a lot, I've never said this to anyone.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that was my thing. I didn't even know. I thought I dealt with that. Or, oh my gosh, where did that come from? And that for me is like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I look up at the heavens as I say that, because it is like, I'm not actually doing anything.
No.
All I'm doing is holding the space for the power of love, as I call it, that energy that turns the world, grows the grass and beats our hearts to do its thing, because that knows everything.
Yeah, it is. It's creating a container, if you like, for a safe place, a safe container, so that you can unburden and let go of all these things. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, a friend of mine once said to me, "I don't know what it is about you, but I always tell you things that I've never told anybody else." It's just like, because it's a safe place. Yeah. It's a safe space. Yeah, and that's so important, isn't it? And then once people have got to the point where you maybe kind of got, oh, okay, right, okay, here's the, the key points here. Do you give advice as to how people can, or not give advice, but to prompt people to take action? Because you were talking about taking action. What kind of actions do people typically have to take to get themselves through this place where they're, once they've identified the issue, typically what kind of actions might you take?
Again, a really good question, because it's this beautiful paradox of the action is taking no action. Let me explain, right? The action is to do nothing. Unlike many other therapies or types of work that I've done on myself, one of the most profound things that I've obviously found for myself is what I call the naked philosophy, is to strip back the stories that we believe to be true about ourselves, so that we can connect to our heart centers, which are covered over with all the pain and the hurt that we don't even realize is there, so that we can then show up with the confidence and the purpose and the joy that we are innately wired to experience. So I often say, don't just listen to me, listen to how what I say resonates with you. That's why I don't tend to, and thank you for correcting the word advise, I just share from my own experience. So when people feel that what we're whatever they're thinking about or whatever is said in the conversation resonates, that's when we pause, we breathe, just a few in and out breaths to settle us into our heart centers, and we feel our beating hearts. And that for me is it's the first thing I always ask people when they feel triggered or angry or uncomfortable about what's coming up, the unlovely that we've suppressed. If we can just pause, breathe and feel our beating heart, we take our attention away from our heads, which is where we overthink stuff, and make it very real for ourselves. And we start beginning to settle ourselves into the energy that is beating our hearts, that thing that knows everything. But that takes practice, and we do that bit at a time. So I encourage people to hold themselves in the present moment by feeling their beating heart, because that then will activate the love and the light, the energy that is orchestrating all things. That is 5,000 times more powerful than your mind. And if we can just hold ourselves centered in our hearts and we activate that heart space, it will draw to it all the unlovely that we've suppressed, the pain, the darkness, the tension, the stresses, the stuff that we would rather admit doesn't exist. And it comes to the heart center. And just like turning on the light in a dark room, darkness disappears, because darkness is not the opposite of light, it's the absence of light. So when we can learn to tap into the love that is in our hearts, that naturally will disperse the darkness that we have suppressed, that we will do everything in our power to not reveal. You know, that thing that, what is it that I would rather you didn't know about me? That stuff that we keep saying begins to attract towards the heart center. And then that light will, and the darkness coming together, that's when we can feel whole and more complete, rather than completely separate, the more we resist trying to feel the unlovely.
Yeah, and trying to pretend. You talked about masks earlier. It's you know, putting these masks on. We have to take these masks off and be ourselves. And you know, again, that's very difficult for a lot of people to do. So to have a guiding hand, I think is really important. And I think that, you know, I love what you said about darkness not being the opposite of light. It's an absence of light. So it's a beautiful way of putting it. And when you do shine that light, or have that light fill and dissipate the darkness, the difference is extraordinary. I think that's really lovely. So you've come to this point where you're helping people get through really hard times. And let's face it, a lot of people right now are going through some really tough times.
Yeah.
And, you know, at the moment, we've got an issue with the cost of living. We've got, you know, people are coming out of this COVID lockdown, still not quite maybe recovered from that. A lot of people have lost their livelihoods. A lot of people are going through really, really tough times. So what are some of the things that people might do? And yes, I always say to people, I don't give advice, but, you know, that word pops up every so often, but it's not advice. It's like, you know, what are the things that you have done? What are the things that, you know, people can do if they choose to help them get through this?
I love this question, because it really gets to the crux of how we can help ourselves and take responsibility. The first thing always is what I've just shared, that what I call the simple as 1, 2, 3, pause, breathe, feel my beating heart. One of the other things that I think is really important to remember is that we live our lives with other people. And if you can take the focus off where you're struggling and maybe think of somebody because if you don't have people around you, then you can always think of somebody that you love dearly, somebody that's important to you, and imagine things working out for them. Imagine them feeling at peace. Imagine the things that they have going on in their lives that are causing them strain, stress, maybe even ill health. If people are struggling, think of that person being well, and I call it with a bubble of light around them, because by doing that, you're taking again the attention off yourself. And this is just one way, because ultimately this is about taking responsibility for yourself. But by thinking of somebody else being well, especially when you love that person dearly, you're again, the love that you're giving them can only come from one place. The truest place is from your own heart center. So again, by thinking of somebody else being well, you're also thinking of yourself being well. That's one way, because often we can find it easier to help somebody else before we help ourselves.
Yeah.
I often find when people don't want to look at their own stuff, then okay, let's just think of somebody else that you love dearly. Whether it's a neighbor, an elderly neighbor, or, you know, you've got a loving friend or whatever it might be. Think of that person. And as you begin to soften, literally soften by being more in your heart space, then you can start to think, okay, maybe I can apply this to myself. Maybe actually, if I could just be kind to myself. Maybe one of my favorite things is when I don't know what to do, I just stare into a flame. I just stare into a flame. When I feel either overwhelmed or I've got all these lovely tools that I use that I've helped me over the years and I help my clients with. And I think, do you know what? I don't want to journal. I don't want to dance. I don't want to do my mirror work. I don't want to do a meditation. And, you know, that resistance, it's not because I can't, it's because I won't. Then one of the most therapeutic things I do, and I always have one by my desk, I've got it there. I just stare into the flame, because the flame is alive. The flame reminds me that it consists of the wick and the candle.
Yeah.
And therefore, and I believe that we are energetic beings having a human experience. And by staring into the flame, and as I breathe it and as I look into the flame, again, it takes me out of my head. Our problem is because we're in our heads too much. Our problem is because we rely on the mask. The problem is the fact that we think we have a problem. The problem is because, exactly.
Yeah.
So by just keeping it really simple, you don't have to run for miles or eat lettuce every day or meditate for hours. Let's just keep it really simple. And if a lot of people are new to taking responsibility for themselves and looking after themselves properly, then the last thing we want to do is say to them, you've got to meditate for an hour, and they'll run a mile.
Yeah. No.
Can you pause? Can you breathe? Can you feel your beating heart? Can you stare into a flame? Can you think of someone you love and send love to them? Most people can do that.
You're right. And I'm glad you brought up the flame. Light a candle and just sit and empty your mind and just stare
give it
at
to
that.
the flame.
Yeah.
Let it burn.
Yeah. Let it burn.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't burn anything down. Don't burn the house down. Be safe with it. But candles, I mean, I love the can I say I love the energy of that flame. I love lighting a candle and just, it's like an open fire. Do you remember when we used to have open fire? Some of us still do, but it used to be far more common when I was growing up that you would have open fires. And I remember as a kid, I used to just stare into the embers, and that's almost a form of meditation.
Exactly. And why is it a meditation? Because it helps you become familiar with. That's all meditation is. It helps you become familiar with the energy that is beating your heart. Because if that energy isn't there, you're not here.
Yeah.
So again, by bringing, and how many times when people are going through a hard time, do we light a candle for them?
Yes.
How many times I'm the light of the world? How many times is a candle? And I love, again, the analogy is if you've got your candle and I've got mine and mine's a light, by you taking your light from my candle, I don't lose anything. Yeah. And if everybody kept their candle alight and then just could fan the flames, then again, the light, bring a light into an unlovely place, a sad feeling, a problematic relationship, a situation where you're struggling with. And there might be listeners going, oh, really? Is that going to solve all my problems? It's a flipping good start.
It is a good start.
At the end of the day, you've got to start somewhere.
I couldn't agree more, and it's time to start another break right now to hear from our sponsors, but we'll be back with Vanessa and more of her wisdom right after this.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And you're listening to Alchemy 101 here on UK Health Radio. And we pick up my conversation with the Naked Coach as something about candles had triggered a memory of mine. As you were talking, for some reason, it popped into my mind. John F. Kennedy. I used to collect stamps when I was a kid, and I used to have a stamp with a very famous saying of his. It was a picture of him on the stamp from the US and a flame, and it said, "And the light from this flame shall truly light the world." Words that I might not have it absolutely down, but that has stuck with me all my life. The light from this flame shall truly light the world. If you think about that flame and that flame, bringing that flame into your heart, that light into your heart, and that's what's going to light the world.
Absolutely. Again, bringing it back to taking responsibility for yourself. If our flame is never extinguished while we are living and breathing, ever. It might be very, very dim, but it's just by placing your attention on it, and you can imagine the flame getting bigger and bigger within. Not only do you feel warm, not only are you activating your heart center, but again, can you imagine that if everybody just did that?
Yeah.
Our world will not feel as dark and as heavy as it is. And I think one of the phrases I have a lot coming up into my head through my work and through my day is, what's the alternative? If people say to me, oh, come on, Vanessa, really, how's that going to solve my problems? Okay, that's fine. What's the alternative? Talk to me about the alternative if you don't do that. If you don't do the simplest of things, like stare into a flame, think about a loved one, pause and breathe and feel your beating heart. If you don't do those things, what's the alternative? Talk to me about that. Well, I'm going to remain angry. Okay. And then so talk to me about that. Well, I'm just remembering that when we continue to focus on what is not working, what is unlovely, we are going to get more of the same.
Of course.
The invitation is take just seconds to breathe or stare into a flame and just be honest with yourself and go, how much better do I actually feel because of that? And then for a minute the next time, then a minute and a half. Again, we've got to retrain ourselves, and we've got to understand who it is at the center of us, who we truly are, because we are so used and we're taught from the moment we're born to listen to everybody else. Nobody teaches us to listen to ourselves.
That is so true. Yeah, that is so true. And we're always, well, many of us, for much of our lives, end up living somebody else's life because we're told you've got to do this and you've got to be that. And you go, oh, yeah, well, I must do. Otherwise, I'm not a good person.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. And, coming back to that idea of taking responsibility, because people often today, I think, they just kind of relinquish their responsibility for their well-being and their health. They think it lies with somebody else, Yes, go to a doctor if you need to go to a doctor. But, there are things that we can do on our own, which are very simple, that will actually help us feel better and be more well, if that's a way of expressing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that taking responsibility thing for me is very important.
It is, because again, we're not taught how to do that. So all we know is somebody will feed us, somebody will clothe us, somebody will teach us, somebody will tell us what time we can go to the bathroom, somebody will tell us what to come back in from the playground, somebody will tell us what to do for our homework, somebody will probably even tell us what career is good for us. Somebody will, and then we go out into the big wide world and other people saying, follow me, do this, do the other, all the rest of it. And then we get to a point in our lives, and this is where people tend to reach out to people like myself and you, is they go, something's got to change. I am miserable. Like my health is on the floor. I feel like utter rubbish. I can't seem to make anything work, however hard I try. And it's because we are relying so much on our physical bit of us, our physical bodies. We're not used to listening to ourselves. And that we identify with everything that got us to this point. So just like an addict in recovery, we have to die away from who that person was, who they think they are, who they feel they are, everything, all the choices they've made and the choices they've allowed others to make for them, who actually fall apart at the seams, literally. And that's why they need support and encouragement. And whether it is a coach or a mentor or a therapist or a dear friend, but I call it Thelma and Louise, you go, I go. You're not in this alone. I haven't got a clue what I'm doing, some people say, but I know that you're not going to do it alone.
And I think that's important as well, because, there is so much of this idea of separation in the world. We're separate. We're not. We're all together. We're all part of the same thing. We're all connected. And you're not doing anything alone. You don't have to do anything alone or feel that you're doing anything alone.
No.
And, if you are in that state, reach out and speak to somebody. Just speak to somebody who can listen without judgment.
Absolutely.
Judgment is the key thing as well here, isn't it?
Well, I think that's a lot of the reason why I don't think we're vulnerable, because we are fearful of the response we'll get from somebody else or the outside world. So a lot of what I get excited about in my work is helping people become very familiar with being comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because nothing is going to hurt you when you come from that place. And embarrassment is just a horrible feeling. Shame is just a horrible feeling.
Yeah.
Anger is it's not very nice to feel, but all of these things are still feelings. So just like the flame, you are alive, right? You are alive when you feel, and it's getting used to and being okay with feeling these bad feelings. They're not bad. They just make you feel bad, and nobody really wants to feel bad.
Yeah, exactly. And let's not say either that, we should never feel anger or never feel,
Not at all.
we have these feelings. It's just when we hold on to that and some of us don't express it, be angry, feel anger, let it go, move on.
Mm.
That's the way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And a lot of that is done by just remaining still and bringing it, allowing it to come up. Because the thing that woke me up in 2017 was when I was really struggling with something. And I remember sobbing down the phone to a girlfriend, leaving her a voice note, because I tried everybody. I tried all my beautiful family, my friends. No one was picking up. I tried about seven people. Nobody picked up. And I was like, I'm so alone. Nobody cares, blah, blah, blah. And with that, I had this voice come to me saying, but I'm here. And I was like, oh my gosh. And in that moment, I brought I feel so ashamed. I'm so angry. I'm all of this. And I brought it all to the surface. And because I did, all of a sudden my tears just stopped.
Yes.
It was like, literally, it's like, I even stood there in the garden going, oh my God, what's just happened?
Yeah.
What's just happened?
Yeah.
Because it was not good for me to feel hatred or angry. I'd been encouraged not to feel hatred or angry growing up. So it is like, I can't feel that, squash it back down again, and it comes back up again, squash it back down again. It can't. And at this point, I was like, rah, rah, rah. And I got angry and really hateful and let it all out. And poof, just went.
It
just
goes,
like turning the light on in a dark room. It was just gone.
Yeah.
And that's the healing.
It is the healing. And, that pushing it down and having it come back up, it's like a beach ball. I think it was Debbie Ford who wrote The Dark Side of the Light Chasers.
Brilliant.
Yeah, who talks about the beach ball effect. And, the more you push it down, the harder it will come up.
Yes, absolutely. Because it generates energy.
Yeah.
Because not everything is energy. Like you beautifully said, even the unlovely emotions are not, it's all an emotion. It's all on it's all on the feeling stick, if you like.
Yeah.
But we've got to be able to be okay with feeling the anger, the shame, the embarrassment, the guilt, the fear.
Yes.
Because it's the opposite. It's one side of us. It's not, don't we let it define us if we resist feeling it. So when we can accept that unlovely part of us and truly be with it, that's a brilliant book by Debbie Ford. I would really recommend people read that one. And understand it is part of the whole. It's part of the whole. And perfectionism, right, which is my thing I'm in recovery for, is actually, I don't want to feel the unlovely, the sadness, the misery, the pain. I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel that. And I live on one end of the stick that's not healthy because it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And it's just about allowing yourself to, practice being still and letting it come up. And,
Yeah. And remember that nobody's perfect, right? What is perfection? What's perfection anyway? What is that?
I don't think there's such a thing as there really is. Divine, which is part of the whole.
Yeah.
But it keeps
perfect.
us striving, doesn't it?
It does. And it's
exhausting.
It's exactly what I was going to say. It's exhausting. So, let go of that. So I guess then what we're saying is that whatever we're going through right now, and a lot of us are going through a lot right now, lay it all bare.
Yeah.
Just get it all out there and ask for help because, hopefully there is help if you ask for it. I mean, there must be somebody around you who would be able to give you some support or help. So ask for it. And but I can see that a lot of people are sort of bottling it all up and just worrying and obsessing over, the awful things that are going on right now. And there are awful things going on right now. But let's just acknowledge that, get it all out there, and then, get help where we need it.
And community is so important. If you've got a girlfriend or somebody that's prepared to listen to you, do you know what? Even if you haven't, press audio memo on your phone and talk to your phone. I have found that so therapeutic.
That's great.
Yeah. In the summer, I go into the woods, but it's a little bit chilly at the moment. But either go and talk to the trees because here's the thing. I think when we give what's worrying us a voice, some people like to journal, but some people, if you're not familiar with journaling, you don't know where to start. But you can always just press the button and just talk to your phone, even if you delete the memo, or talk to the trees. but just give what's troubling you a voice, because when you hear it out loud to yourself, there's a liberation in that. It's very cathartic, very liberating, but you're giving it an energy that's now out of you and not stuck in you.
Yeah.
And then by doing that, you just let the universe know that you're ready to ask for help. You're ready for support. And guess what? You're likely to bump into somebody at the bus stop or in Tesco's, or a girlfriend will ring, or whatever. That's the way. Or you'll read an article that will lead you to a course or whatever. But we have to trust that there is an alternative to the utter unlovely that is going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
And the pain and fear and stress that it is causing people. It's utterly tragic what is going on in our human world right now. But if it's that unlovely, can we trust that there is also on the other end of the stick, as the law of polarity tells us, the lovely, the utterly lovely. And where are you going to place your focus? And I'm tingling all over as I say that, because my invitation to anyone, and I invite myself every single day to do this, where do I want my focus to be today? And sometimes I even ask myself, well, I say sometimes, all the time throughout the day. Yesterday I had a particularly tough afternoon, and I can sit there and I can go, right, this is not happening to me right now. I'm just going to stop, pause, breathe, feel my beating heart. Now, where do I want to place my attention? But we don't. We plow through because we're taught that that's what's best and that's the way people win. Who's winning? Let's just play.
What is this winning?
Exactly. But there is an alternative. And I think the more we can trust in that, give our attention to that, give our energy to that, then we can, as I call it, turning Titanic, we can very gently begin to feel better. And the more people that feel better, that's when we start to see the difference. It's got to start somewhere.
So you turn the Titanic, and instead of going under, you actually manage to survive. Dodge the iceberg. Yeah. Wonderful. Vanessa, this has been so inspiring. Thank you very much for coming on the show. If anybody wants to get in touch with you and lay it all bare, put it all on the line and ask for your help, where do they get in touch with you?
Oh, bless you. Thank you. Yeah, they can get in touch with me via the website, which is about to be relaunched at vanessalouise.life, or we have a Facebook community as well. So they're more than welcome to reach out to me on Facebook. But
great.
And is the chat with anyone?
That's fantastic. Does the Facebook community have a separate kind of name, or is it?
It's Vanessa Loves. Yes.
Vanessa Loves.
It's private, so you are safe in there.
Yeah. Right. Oh, well, that's great. Yeah, that's fantastic to know. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for, as I said, coming on the show. It's been really wonderful to talk to you, and I'm so glad that you turned your life around and you're helping other people turn their lives around now. It's just wonderful to know that there are people like you out there helping others with their well-being. So thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you, JJ. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine, I can assure you, and hopefully yours, our listeners too. Now, this is a woman with such a lot to give, so do check out vanessaloves.life. Learning to love ourselves really is a great starting point if we're to live a life we love. And with that, we've come to the end of the show. I hope you'll join me again here on Alchemy 101 and UK Health Radio for more inspirational guests. Remember, we're on the world's favourite podcast channels now too. If you're listening to the podcast and you like what you hear, do subscribe and share this episode, and it would be amazing if you could leave a review too. It not only helps us, but hopefully others who might find the information useful. You can also download this show from the Alchemy 101 page on ukhealthradio.com. And why not check out our sister publication, Health Triangle Magazine, while you're on the website too. For now, though, I look forward to being with you again soon, as I say goodbye from me and that nightingale.